And I actually don't necessarily use a lot of the video content, but I'll share it. I'll make it accessible to you, and you can do anything you want with it. What I do
Okay.
is I have like processes in the background where I mostly produce like written content from the transcript. I have like a bunch of I have like I've rewritten by like agentic processes for that like 3 or 4 times. So I have like I have it's called I have an automation that like creates it and publishes it to Ghost. But sometimes for an article, you're just like I'd rather just like use Claude and like write interact with
Hmm.
it more. So, but I'll produce some content from our discussion and just share it with you, and probably I'll put it onto my site. And anyway, the other thing is, so yeah, Sunny and I talked about doing this show called I branded it SunnyBytes. I like the idea, and I produced some content materials for him about the show. But I think we can talk about whatever you're focused on, kind of the brewer stuff. Yeah, you have like a light over your head, which is
Should I
like
turn that off maybe?
yeah, you could try. You might end up being dark, but try turning it off and see if it's what the
Let's
light
see what
looks like.
happens. Let's see what happens. This is live in studio, folks.
I think it'll be good. You'll be a little darker, but I think it will be better.
Be the Dark Lord. I think it'll be fine actually.
Yeah, yeah, no, it looks
Yeah,
totally fine. That's
yeah,
better.
yeah.
So you're working. You've been working on agentic or sort of AI GTM for Brura, and you and I we looked at some stuff a while back, and but it's been a bit, so I'm curious like where you're at today, and then I've been working on all kinds of crazy things, and so we'll just kind of share. I think if that works for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, so yeah, you did have a look, a while back. I think it was pretty premature at that point, but I think yeah, it's gaining a lot more clarity right now, as we're working towards, as you may or may not know, we're working towards sort of a June deadline for closing the circle on the product. By that I mean by then everything should be working in concert. There's always room for improvement, and there's a lot of room for improvement, but at least then we'll have all the major components working. Yeah.
So let's talk about what's the main focus now. Last time it was on the kind of signals intelligence and
Mm.
for GTM, and you were going to focus there, and and is that really still what you're mostly focused on?
Okay, so the short answer is yes, but the long answer is, how do you produce good intelligence for in a GTM environment, or really any environment? If you peel back one layer, how do you do that without just being an LLM wrapper?
No,
How
yeah,
do you
LM wrappers are like dead. It's the next gen, right?
right? Yeah. So where so I use the analogy. There's a couple of like analogies or perspectives I usually share. One is that if you're going to introduce AI or agentic AI into anything, just taking the existing workflow and injecting AI into it is like, at the advent of the automobile, starting to feed your horse petrol or gas. It just doesn't work. Just so.
Yeah, I think where I like the architecture or like the revolution of AI, I think maybe I actually see it now. Like I think I knew it was going to go end here, and I didn't exactly know how. And I'll tell you the thing that just completely changed the game for me. And I think in retrospect, it will be the most. I will align. So Jensen Wang at NVIDIA, he said that OpenClaw is the most significant technical innovation essentially of our time, and then everybody's like, "What the heck?" And at first I was like, what the heck? But like a guy like that doesn't say that for no reason. And I looked at it more and I thought about it and I understood what was going on there. And I'm like, yeah, he's totally right. And and I think that understanding that why he said that will answer everything about what's going to happen next in AI and really position you for like how do you solve that problem? Because if you take the extension of that, see where I've taken it is like, okay, basically what it's going to look like is digital robotic machines that people build, and there's going to be a gazillion of them, right? Like everybody, the article that I want to produce later, kind of related to this, is essentially like if you haven't built your first like robot from scratch yourself, then you have missed the point of AI completely. Like like
Mm.
that. So when you take that extension, you're like, now what does that say for what you guys are doing? It's like you need to be building robots that have proprietary knowledge about GTM, right? And processes that only they know. And I think there's a stack for that. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but it's probably going to be local, uh, local like database. It's like a local, it's LLM, local probably LLM on a server on the like package machines. You have your container and it has life basically. Build your whole,
Mm.
and so that's to me like my sense right now is that that there's a revolution and that the AI model ideas that were like, hey, we're like building something that interfaces with an LLM. Those are like all just gonna like die rapidly.
Yeah, if that's all you do, probably yes.
Yeah, yeah,
If that's all you do. Now, the interfaces to the foundational models aren't really that great, these chat windows. I think that there's um, an overemphasis on the conversational nature of AI. I think it's an inheritance because from the development environments of AI, where talking to the machine was like the ultimate test or something. So that's the interface we were introduced to, right? But you don't really. That's not really what you want. Now, if I also I sometimes equate it to having all these agents is like having a team of employees. You don't want employees. You don't want to be talking to your employee all the time. You want to be able to instruct your employee, and they should actually just come back and tell you when it's done, right?
yeah. I'm about to like embark on trying to. That's what I'm like. So I just I've gotten so deep down the rabbit hole in the last like 3 or 4 days, and I think it's like I'm like, okay, is this a really waste of time, or is this like what I have to do to like take it to the next level?
Mhm.
So I ended up going down this road of vibe coding. Have you have so what I did was and it's so because it's so much of it has come down for me to cost, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is like how much money am I spending to get the outcome and the output? So the architecture that I ended up with is I used a tool called Windsurf. I tried to do Claude Code and I didn't like it, and Windsurf worked for me. Like
Hmm.
I literally am spending like all of my time, like my new why I no you know what I want to call my windsurf I want to call windsurf like my I want to call it Tim because it reminds me of this like hackery coder kid, right? So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
so finally I was like, but where does this all end? And I'm like, where it ends is windsurf building me a a containerized architecture where I could deploy and interact with like an agent that I've created in like an encapsulated, safe, relatively safe environment, and then just start like using it to like produce interesting. I don't really know. I mean, this is the next frontier, right? So I that the only reason I bring that up is that I think there's a risk of like of building things in a way of thinking that was like AI 1.0, and then you're like, okay, AI 2.0 is here, right?
Yeah.
No, it's mind blowing. I'll show you a couple of things, and then I'd love to see if you can like this. I'll show like just mind blowing things that I've been able to do that I never like. First, it was like, wow, this is a mind blowing one, and then it went to like this incredibly next insane level. So, just stuff that yeah. So this is windsurf super quick. And it's right now I'm actually having a hard time. Like I the hardest part of this whole process is getting the secure communication with the actual like Docker droplet.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying, and like I keep failing on Ubuntu. I have a Debian like droplet working with Windsurf, but I haven't been able to like it keeps getting stuck. So I'm just gonna stop it, and then I'm gonna I don't have time to fix. I don't want to fix it while I'm on the call. But if I, because you end up having to do these like command lines and other things like that. And it's like, I'm not a technical person, right? But then I was able to do these like absolutely like mind blowing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me just bring up this here. I'll show you, like, this is the article that I did yesterday. You know, like all AI. Oh, wait, this isn't the one I want to show you. This is the one. Wait, where is it? Oh yeah, it is this one. It has this like interactive React thing. Then I had Claude right,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had Windsurf Architect so that it would basically play inside of Ghost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my wildest dreams, I could never build this in the past.
Sure.
Like I wouldn't even think this, right? And so then I have, you go all the way down and there's like, okay, open source AI landscape. So this is an article that I'm putting together. This article itself, by the way, I want to share it with you. It's really good. This is about really like the origins of AI and transformers and how all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
works. The so you go all the way down, and it's like, okay, so then there's this landing page that I also developed, I think in Claude, right? It has interactive, stuff. These are like, real charts that are dynamically generated. That's just here, cost of open source AI. If you use these like LLMs, right? But you get into this like, you know, cost is going to be everything, right? And understanding and basically use, setting up agents that you have intelligent, tools and, and learning how these different core, tools work, right? Like if you put everything through Gemini Pro and you do all this stuff, you're getting your credit, you're like, hey, I'm spending $500 a month on, on AI to power something that, so that's it. Anyway,
So,
this is all AI generated. I think
yeah.
this is using Anthropic, but
Mm-hmm.
so calendar embedded, whatever. All of this is something that I was able to create as someone who doesn't write code and figure out how to deploy it. And so then I'm like, this is cool. But it's still not like, it's still not it's like amazing output. But the real thing is, how do you go then to the full autonomous being, basically? And then you're like, hey, you need to, what you do is you probably, I think the model would be create a droplet that executes your special kind of like research and all of these things and produces outputs for people. And then you basically sell the droplets, right?
Well, see, what I think is,
Or access to the
yeah.
droplets.
So when possibilities are infinite, right? When there's like infinite possibilities, like you can create anything. So people then just try to, like, or let's say you can draw anything on this, and you can make it come alive. Okay, some technology that just says you can do anything, which basically this is. So then what do people do? They draw a flower, do something really simple, because your imagination becomes your limitation, right? It's really your imagination that becomes your limitation. You mentioned earlier, okay, that what's the changing workflow? Like what's how are fundamental economic processes changing with these possibilities? And if you don't have the imagination to envisage it, you don't really know what to build, right? Do you understand what I mean? So it's not really, if the limitation of creating code and doing all this, if that kind of if that's unlimited, you can just anyone can do it. Then the the sort of your limitation is your imagination. Can you actually?
Yeah, it's well, I think you're right. It's create well, what it is that it will foster maybe like it put more value on creativity and also your own unique knowledge, right? So like,
Okay.
and I think this is the piece that I'm starting to think about in terms of like the agent architecture is that the agents are going to have they have their own knowledge, right? And so you can train, like let's say you create a droplet essentially, right? And you train the droplet, it's what is it called? It's the what am I? It's the what's the kind of database? I keep thinking Vertex, but it's not. It's a what's the name? The type of database they use in AI. It's like the
Neo4j.
why am I forgetting? What's that?
Neo4j. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, it's like hold on. Oh, vector
Oh yeah,
database.
the type of a database. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like okay, you're gonna have like you have a droplet and it vectorizes, and on the droplet you're accumulating your it's what is it called? It's called it's on my page. It's the hold on, I have to remember all the terminology. This is so bad.
Hmm.
Hold on, it's there's the cost of basically training and vectorizing data, right?
Yeah, that's
So
but
it's
yeah, there's a cost associated to that, but it's not enormous in a commercial application. I'm pretty amazed at how low the costs are already. With the amount of data you can actually vectorize and the falling prices of tokens and all this. The it's But back to this thing about imagination. In my personal view, or yeah, I would say when developing something is left to our imagination, we imagine expansive things, right? As human beings, if I can build, if I can build a house when building materials are restrictive, or a limiting factor, I'm going to build a palace or a castle when they're not restricted, right? So our imagination is expansive. So we just imagine bigger and bigger things. Whilst what I think is like the key to succeeding in vibe coding or whatever is to do something very small, and do it really well, which is like a cog in a bigger machine. And that's
hmm,
my experience with Brura, which is, over what, a year we've been working on this now. Started out with a very naive little idea, which I inherited, and then the first thing we did was to start use Lovable and all these tools, and it became really expansive, and you had all these UIs, and it looked like we were
mm,
like almost there, right? And we should have agents for everything from making coffee to booking meetings and everything. And what we boiled it down to is something very different from what we started out with, because we've shed a lot of that execution stuff, which probably is can be handled by just about any agent, right? But anyways, I'll try to put it into perspective. Is the sort of the mental process that we've had to go through, and me in particular, is, so how is this GTM stuff going to how is this going to materialize itself in the world that we are moving into in the future? What's it going to be like? Because we're already seeing the current sort of GTM processes, or go to market, for those people who don't know what the acronym is for, sales processes. They've been defined the same way for 100 years. The funnel, the pipeline, all of that. And those approaches to it are defined by the limiting factors in that world. And the limiting factor in a world with less communication would be leads, prospects. They're your gold if you're a sales guy, right? So you're entering in a world where you can just buy millions virtually. I mean, or actually buy, if you have the money for it, you can just buy millions of prospects from LinkedIn or Apollo
Yeah,
or
you
Clay.
can get information, and your original design was focused. So, well, where are you at today? Like, what is it that you're building? Give me the 30-second
Okay,
go.
so first of all, I think the acid test, if you're going to build anything that involves AI, agentic, or really invest in anything today, are you solving for a fundamental economic process or a transient workflow? By that I mean, will people have to sell things in the future? Will there be economic transactions between um, customers and suppliers? Will you
That's
have to?
I mean, that's a
Will,
really huge yes, yeah, yeah. So actually, that hits on. So when I was on a Tech Talks show with Surrent
Hmm,
last, I guess it was just last week, and I don't know if I said it really well, but it was basically what I the idea was, look, technology is always a competitive environment, and it's constantly going through these upheavals. Like, the
hmm,
Romans invented the ballista, and that was a key technology for them dominating the world in their time, and everybody had to get up to speed or die, right? And that's sort of
hmm,
the technology side of it. And the flip side of it, though, is, it 5,000 years, or thousands of years even before that, the core ideas of just business and trade. I think it was like a Sumerian tablet that even had that even it illustrated things that would be like modern corporations with like invest. It showed who the investors were, how much gold they put in, and what they were going to get out of it. So there's these I think there's these sort of timely, authentic, like personal parts of our world that are not going to change. They're going to be sheltered from this, and there's still going to be people and all of these other sort of timeless archetypes of of behavior experiences that
well,
people have.
yeah. So what I think is that um, uh, unless the entire economic system that we're living within, a fairly free market, or at least a market economy, where you can freely buy and sell stuff. Unless that is going to completely change into some dystopian communist system, we have to sell. We have to sell, and people.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I think that relationships and
So
and so yeah, no, keep going. So but
no. So my
give
point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is that my this is my kind of my initial point. Are you solving for a transient workflow? So there's certain transient workflows that can go away, right? Because technology efficient makes them redundant. Like having, for instance, having a secretary or a front office or something is having someone employed to do that, or to stamp all the mail and take it down to the. That was a process, but it's been taken away by or replaced by technology, right? So that's a transient workflow. But sales, and farming, producing food, and certain transportation of goods, these are fundamental economic processes that won't go away, no matter how much technology or AI. They will change fundamentally. You can move things in planes through the sky and not a horse and carriage or something. But it's still the same thing. You're moving goods from point A to point B because they're more worth selling them there than to keeping them at home, right? So that's transportation. Sales is another thing. You have to goods and buyers need to find each other. So that's kind of, are you solving for something fundamental? The next question is, what parts of the current process for doing this activity of selling are fundamental and which are transient? i.e., can be replaced or transformed by technology. Yeah. So I think there's a lot. If you take sector by sector, legal, medical, sales, business administration, and you look at the different sort of areas of practice that we have, which ones can be automated the most by AI? I think sales and marketing is very high on that, right? That there's a lot of automation we can do, but there are
Yeah,
some
there's a
fun.
huge amount of yeah, and you got there. That's kind of what. So you're totally right. And here, I'm going to bring up
But I think there's something left that we cannot really automate, and that's my point.
yeah, keep going on that idea. So
Yeah.
what is it
So
that we cannot automate?
so with at least with the artificial intelligence that we have today, it's been called like called an advanced guessing machine or something, prediction machine. There's a book out where they call it that. I forget the name of it. But anyways, there's certain things that it's not really good at, and that is judgment calls. First of all, right? So making judgment is not something you want to leave to your AI. At least not in the true sense of the word, right? So um, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna see if I can. Focuses in more on it. The Don't worry about the stuff in the boxes. For me, like what remains eternal are these stages of like experience that whether it's a person or even like if you can imagine like AI to AI interaction,
Mm.
right? That these stages of like progress in any conversation or any business really, and you can name them different ways, but for me like this is kind of what I came up with. And like I think they're pretty universal, right? Like people need to find out about you, so if you can create an impact or affect that, like and what happens during that phase is a specific subset of things. Now, I'm trying to say, like, so you one way to look at it would be to say, hey, create value in different in certain slices of this, right? And say like, hey, I'm the best. You have the best approach or a competitively advantageous approach to generating awareness is like one. I think that's kind of what you're saying about keeping it simple and focused, because to me this is go like this is go to like this came out of like all the research I did and said, hey, if I was going to pick one single document template that can encapsulate a full GTM motion, this is what needs to be contemplated. So, like, again, it's not like this is right or wrong. It's just this is the way I ultimately ended up structuring my analytical framework for
Hmm.
this. So, yeah, I think because last time you were like, hey, it's about awareness. It's about awareness to engagement. Let's say it's like, how do you find the people that need? And awareness is actually almost predicated by finding, meaning like awareness is find the right people, like find the watering holes, and then introduce yourself into those watering holes in ways that build awareness. It's reach, it's a certain set of metrics. And so I think if you tackle, if you're saying, hey, I want to like you were looking at saying, hey, you're going to tackle that side, right? How do you find the right people, send the right message at the right time to stimulate awareness, and awareness then leads to engagement, right? Like, which is the goal of awareness is to get somebody into your like environment so that you can engage with them, whatever engagement model you've selected, right? This is so I think in this context, where do you see Brura today, the Brura AI sitting?
Well, um, Look, what I think is that the sales funnel per se, it is. I'm not saying you don't have to do these things that you've divided up into these verticals, but the sales funnel is an industrial metaphor. It's taking the industrial process and applying it to the sales office. So you do this, then you do this, and do this, and it's like a distillery almost. You put in 1,000 leads, and you get 10 clients out of it, right? The funnel. That because you go through all these stages and you do it mechanically and systematically, and that's what's going to happen. The premise for this is that people are actually going to read the flyers they get in their mailbox. So if people are no longer reading the flyers or listening to the ads on the radio, or whatever broadcast is, I'm just imagine the word, right? The broadcasting, it means that there is a ready and willing listening audience out there. What if there no longer is? What if there are just lots of gatekeepers saying, no, 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 you cannot get access to Mr. Davis's attention? Sorry.
Well, how do you? People still have to make decisions. They still
They have
form
to make decisions,
partnerships. They still
and
buy
those
things.
decisions will increasingly be made on the premise of relevance, right? Is what you are trying to say relevant? So your communications digital communications butler will be trained to see, is this relevant or not for Govin, or is this just irrelevant to him, and therefore the you know the individual relevance of what you're communicating is what I'm saying. That's going to be like of increasing importance.
So, is that what you're trying to solve for?
So yeah, so if you think of, so let's say um, if the traditional sales funnel is inspired by the industry and an industrial um, uh, uh, production of something. So what we are actually doing is we're thinking, if this is if leads are kind of abundant, you can just put in as many leads as you want. Then, which was also the limiting factor of traditional sales. You would spend a lot of time when you and I were had hair. We would spend a lot of time actually canvassing, as we would say, finding leads, actually finding people you could actually start the whole process with. Which you don't have to do now. You just import them from from LinkedIn Sales Navigator or something. You just populate your CRM and you're off. The problem now is, how do where do we go from there without wasting 90% of our time? And what I think is that you need then to spend a lot more time on finding out how you can segment your market, like your top box there, segmenting that into lots of very slim segments that maybe have that in common, that they would want to buy your thing, but they would want to be communicated to and approached in different ways. um, and finding out, okay, what channel does that mean that I need to use, and what content, how can I structure that content so it actually gets the point across in a way that's appealing to this tiny group. Okay, then maybe your whole sort of metaphor for sales needs to be different. Um,
You think it's different, or it's just a different like set of like it's a better see to me it's I don't think those change. I think like this is now what how you do these things, but I think these are like 1,000 years from now, people could still use these same ideas and to manage the process. And it doesn't matter if it's a machine or machine to machine, because you still like there's a let's call it this, like almost like a protocol for success, right? The protocols don't change. Like the communication protocols of like HTTP are timeless, right? Even if it's machine to machine, you're still always going to like introduce, you have to know somebody's address, you connect to them, you introduce yourself through some kind of protocol or handshake, and then you deepen that relationship. Like those things happen whether it's a machine or a person or anything. Those relationship protocols are like, I think they're actually timeless.
Sure.
Now, the how they're formed or how they take shape, and that's kind of the interesting piece to me. Like, so I've done a bunch of work on like, okay, how does this get designed? And this is what I'm basically focused on. What I'm focused on building, because for me, like finding people and kind of like I'm more focused on like how do I create continuous engagement and intelligent engagement so that I don't have to do the follow up. Like finding people and other, like to me is like at a small scale, like some of this like early stuff doesn't I've architected it and I have set up for it and a lot of pieces built, but the real intelligence to me is this, right? And actually this shouldn't even be called, this is like an early, you can see I've done a bunch of versions of it.
Mm.
But this is the most important part, right? Is that you have some kind of an autonomous intelligence and it has access to the like specifications. uh Actually, there's actually a third piece here that I actually should add. Now that I think about it, I'm going to actually just copy this real quick and add, because I actually think there's one more piece um, that goes here. It's not going to be that. That's not the right shape. I need a shape and I need one quick. Let's do. This is not going to be helpful. Let's see. These are shapes in use. Sorry, I have to find a good shape. Uh, I'm just going to put a block in and I don't really care. Okay, so it's going to be. Oh, this is good. Fine. Okay, so you need the agent specification. And so what you have is like, you could call this is org and campaign data, basically. So you have access to like, this is basically its knowledge or campaign data and just general like non-specific knowledge. And then the message repo is a little different, is actually like, you could call this a campaign, like this is like the campaign content. This is like organization. Sorry, this is actually just context data. So this is like who the person you're talking to is. And then actually this is the knowledge base. So this is the knowledge like about the campaign. And this to me came from whatever world. It doesn't matter anything. So if you consider when you marry these things together, right? So you have some context. Somebody sends you a message, you have information about the person, and then that information is accessible to the autonomous intelligence, right? And then it also has access to like specific knowledge that you've basically given it access to. Like that's like the knowledge base of like, hey, here's like a series of messages. Like this is my use case for this, is like, hey, I'm going to give you all this insight about like my products and all this stuff, so that when you answer people, now there's more to it. It's going to go use an LLM and all that, but that doesn't matter. But then you have to write the agent specification. Yeah, I actually built the user interface already for this, where you load up, like if you do a new campaign configuration, right? It links to a campaign ID, and then it has the agent specifications, and you can load up whatever it is. So it has information about, like, through the campaign ID you can go and see, like, get like whatever in the message, I can get in access to the information about the person. Yeah, I've been doing a bunch of testing and I'm using a webhook to trigger this. But it's like, okay, here's Magnus. Magnus sent me an information. I go get information about my experience with Magnus, and that's the context data. And then I'm loaded with a bunch of like information, and I have a set of directions. And then basically, once this just starts running, it's just going to handle all of my messages, right? Like, that's it. Like, when people reply to me, I'm not going to reply. I'm going to actually, but what I decided was that I would not ever, I don't want to send messages without having a queue. So it just creates an inbox and then gives me suggestions about how I should engage. And then it's just faster, right? I'm not going to delegate, autonomy to any kind of robot to make decisions for me on in terms of actually clicking the button to send the message.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's architecture, and what I got lost in at first was the by building the agentic. What I missed is that this experience isn't going to work. I mean, this is fine for configuring it and the agentic experience, but really what you need is not just having like a little app, right, that checks and goes to an LLM. You got to have your own droplet that is continuously learning and doing all these other things in order to be at the next level. So what this is really the key question right here. Like, what is this autonomous agent, and how is that, like, it needs these things for sure, but what is the way to build that, because I think if you go this way, right, what happens is this, it basically says how you configure these two things right here, right, the knowledge and the agent specification. That's your secret sauce. Like, the actual how you implement this or whatever, there's a lot of architectures to implement this, but the knowledge that you load it with, right, the decision that you make about, like, I'm going to load this with XYZ framework, and I'm going to give it access to these products and this information about how, all this, and then how you configure this specification for interaction, like, that design is going to be the creative, artistic, for me at least. That's where my creativity and artistry is going to either produce excellent results or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hidden and it's secret, meaning, like, nobody knows, like, when you have a little autonomous bot doing this thing, what kind of knowledge it's fed with and what its instructions are. You can't determine that from the outside.
Okay, so in this context, I would say what's at the core of Brura as a sales intelligence layer is what you call context data. I think what you call context data. So what it is like, it's like a shared mind in that all the agents have access to. Okay, and into this mind goes all the constraints and guardrails you want to put in there, and all the information you wanted to have access to, your red box there, right? Which is kind of it can be very structured information, like what is my ICP, or it can be a whole bunch of documents or resources and stuff you wanted to have access to. That goes into a shared context. Then agent specification is now the context is the third part of the context is behavioral, right? So when the system actually, when your research agent comes up with a piece of research or a signal for you, Do you like this signal or do you not? So you can just give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down in our system, and that goes into the shared context. So less of this kind of stuff and more of something else.
Yeah, I think by context for me is actually not knowledge. Everything but what you're describing is mostly is like a knowledge generation. So you're like, let's say you have what that kind of ends up looking like is some kind of process, right? Where you're basically
Okay.
saying, "Hey, you're like ingesting data to build like the the you have an autonomous process. That's that kind of front end process, right?
Yeah.
So you have an autonomous process. It's like it goes out to the world and like I'm just going to put like the world out here, right? This is external, like this is signals, right? So you're reading. Let's I did something not good there. Here, that's not a. It's like an off page. It's a functional thing. I need just better, simple stuff. Okay, so you have like signals that are out here, right? And or whatever it is. How do I just delete this? There. Okay. So you have signals that are out here. This isn't going to be just right. You're sort of like ingesting those signals and vectorizing those signals, right?
Well,
And
not quite actually. Yeah, that's metaphorically that's right, but in actual fact, they're just not out there.
well, how do you get? You're getting some kind of signals, right?
Yeah, but you have to
The
think about how you're getting those signals, because the way you're getting those signals is through a single prompt, which is really complicated because you're using the shared context. And by the way, this is fairly commonly used the way using the word context in this fashion, where you use the word context for like a shared knowledge base, or shared vectorized knowledge base that your agents use, right?
maybe I need to use a different term for
Yeah,
than
yeah.
context.
So,
Like
do you
context
think
is the
of
setting for the action.
are you thinking of a context as your as the metadata that surrounds a lead?
I'm trying to think. So like I'm trying to understand this sort of signal. So well, you have like what is the end result is you're trying to provide some say, hey, make a decision about who, like what are you attempting to do? You're trying to make a decision about who you should communicate with, right?
It's basically what are your best next best moves.
In terms of like who, but what's the action you're going to take as an output of it?
Well, it could be an outbound communications activity. It could be pertaining to just one person that's in your list of leads, or someone just who has some of the same attributes as a
So
person.
you're trying to answer the question of like, what should I do right now? Like it could be go plan something, or that's a very open ended
Yeah, and
question.
it could be that because you want to reach out to a certain community, you need to be active in that community. This is something.
Yeah, see, I think that
This
would be
is
the
something.
context data for me would be that would be like, hey, what is the context? Like the context is the setting, right? Here, I'll just call this the like setting, right? Like like that's this is the setting, right? So there's like there's a setting that says like, okay, here's the challenge that like where I'm at right now. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm working on to build a community, and there's information about what you're trying, some kind of project or initiative or something. There's information that sets the scene. That's the context to me. And then you have all the knowledge that you say about it. So you're like, hey, I want, like, if you're just saying like here's kind of like actually like a good I use this 8-factor model, right? So the context for me of the 8 factor model is like what decision, what am I trying to decide about, right? My context here is I'm focused on signal, I'm focused on the product offering, and then I provide some information just for me to kind of trigger thinking, right? And then I go through an exercise myself of like I do this 8 factor model of like 360-degree thinking, right?
Hmm.
And so then I come out with something that gives me a direction that says go here, right?
Exactly.
So that's one way of looking at it, is you have to say the context is like, what is the question, what am I trying to answer, right?
Hmm.
and and in what setting and what other metadata can you tell me about, like
Okay.
what time of day it
Yeah.
is maybe, or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So let's go with your terminology here then. So the context or settings, they have to be there. Otherwise, there's no. I mean, an agent will has no way of judging. You know, is this relevant or is this relevant? It will come up with just about anything. It can learn from your feedback, but for it to be more or less effective from the get-go, you need some. You're calling it agent specifications, is part of that, which is like, who am I? What is this company that you're now working for? What kind of people are we looking for? What business are we in? What's our strategy and all of that? And that's something you define in something we call mission control. You set those guardrails, so you kind of narrow things down. But the precise nature of signals, and what is this signal for? It can be for lots of different things, and that judgment call is really not up for the system to make. Is this a signal that is relevant for our marketing efforts? Should I just contact this guy straight away, or should we? Is this like a little email campaign we should do, or should I write a blog post about this? That's kind of a judgment you have to make. Um, uh, our system, the Brewer system, might will eventually evolve into suggest it in next actions in that way. But the signals, what you want to do if you get a signal, the next thing you want to do is maybe drill down into it or make it more precise, right? So this is great, but I need to interact with you, Mr. Agent. You gave me the signal. Let's do a couple of iterations on this to get this really precise. And then I want to take this somewhere. I want to do something with this. I'm not going to tell you what you want to do with it. Maybe it's just the input for a presentation you have to do on Monday's sales meeting. What do I know? But you should also be able to ask your agent to do that. Take this to the next step for me. But the judgment. So what you are doing then is you're, let's say, outsourcing to your agent what it is really good at, which is doing all of this analytical work. You're doing the judgment calls, and you can do iterations on the analytical stuff. New judgment call, and perhaps it's a new decision point where you take next actions. But this is probably the most difficult part of your whole GTM world, isn't it? Prioritizing what to do. How do I spend my time, and how do I spend my team's time, and how do I spend my company's money? Today, this week, this month, this quarter. And you pour a lot of time and energy into the analytics of that, or you just go by gut feeling or by old habit, which also happens a lot. So if there's anything that we're working on improving in Brura, it's the intelligence of those decisions, right? Um, and any kind of intelligence organization is built on that same principle. You have an analytical arm, and you have an operative arm. And I think our thinking around not only GTM but lots of processes are going to be broken down into um, um, those kind of categories. Actually, you can use that to break down a lot of the processes that we are used to thinking of in linear fashions, or in a metaphorical fashion that we have inherited from the industrial age, which many of us grew up in.
Hmm. I mean, so when you go, what like there's something that's going to trigger you to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how does this fit into somebody's like actual like
So
experience? You're like,
what triggers you to make a decision anyways, regardless if there are agents or no agents?
well, you have two things. You have planned thing. You have three things. You could say you have one is I have a structured process, and then I have a plan, and I do the next, and I like a routine.
That's
Let's
not a
say every
decision.
Monday, like
Just holding the meeting on Monday because it's scheduled, that's really not a decision. Having
no, no, that's what I'm saying. But that would be a point at which you would make a decision. Like people say, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to meet on Monday, and then I'm going to make decisions about what I'm going to do
Okay,
this
so the
week.
decisions you are making in that meeting, they are more or less informed, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can. They can be. Yeah, that's sort of the point.
So
So you say,
exactly,
I'm going to sit
yeah,
down.
that's the point. That is exactly the point. If you had all the answers before the meeting, you could just hand out the decisions and we can all go on our way. But there's a sharing of information, and there's a qualification of information, or call it intelligence, happening in that meeting. And based on that, you as the manager of this team, you make some judgment calls, and that's how we can actually get on with our week. I know what I'm going to do.
I think so. So the idea here is it's signal. That, see, when I think of signal, I think so because what I'm saying is that's one another type of signal. The signal element of this would be something external occurs, and I'm going to like, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe you say I have a queue of things that 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 we need to decide today. Like like there's something important happened and it's a signal. Like what it like to me, like when I think of signal, it's like a news article occurred and now we need to respond to
Well,
it,
it
right?
doesn't need to be a news article. It could simply be that.
No, it could be anything,
Yeah,
right?
look, I'll give you another example, which is not like broadcasting or media at all. It could be confluence of things, right? Some guy who's either in your prospect list or looks like someone in your prospect list, has the same attributes, is crying about something on LinkedIn. Um, at the same time, there's a Forrester report on some of this stuff is just come out, and bear in mind we're within your domain because your domain has been defined, right? Has to be defined. It's not a Forrester report about just anything. That would be general. So it's actually pertaining to what you can deliver, what you do. So that means that you have a a great opportunity to actually contact this person, and you've been alerted to this by your analytical team, your agentic analytical team. This is happening. These guys, these three guys are making noises that comply with some piece of research, which again is highly relevant to what you offer in the market. Now that takes a lot. I mean, that's an impossible task to be doing with a human sales team, right? But it's a very feasible task to do, to give to an agentic sales team if it's set up right. So that means that your things like who should be your prioritized leads, etc., is a continuously shifting, that's continuously evolving according to the research and the signals you're getting, the judgment calls you're making, and how you're instructing and re-instructing the agentic team, your research team, right? So then you get, do you see how that ties into the whole process without being linear in the sense that it used to be because it just had to be.
Yeah, I think it looks kind of like this, right? Um, I think what you're describing looks a little like you have some kind of signal collector that is actually like these this part is a little bit you I mean in reality you have to set this up. You have to say, these are the channels, these are the places that I'm collecting information from, right? There's some kind of collection mechanism that is actually like sort of actually, to be honest with you, is control. It should the arrow should be this way. It's really controlled by the it's so hard for me to get the arrow on this for some
But
reason.
you're absolutely correct that when the agent does ask for signal, it needs, the precision of the query decides the precision of the answer, right? So
Actually, I think it's got to be a little different than that, because the autonomous agent should be continuously processing information, and
naturally, yes.
so it's continuously processing, and
Mm.
then it's like loading metadata about what it processed, and probably in the process it's just like doing
And
some kind of
reiterating on the research, yes.
yeah, and like collecting constantly saying like there was a guy I on the Surrent show I did, there was a guy who was in like intelligence gathering and stuff like that, and he was like, AI has changed it completely because all these different sources, they're just continuously plowing through all these sources, and then they're using all this intelligence to decide which things are relevant and not relevant or important to look at, but still a human being in the end has to actually sit down. And so I think that this is
The
actually the
judgment calls.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the judgment calls, and that's exactly what we built into our system. And my inspiration when I had to kind of reimagine all this GTM stuff, one of my points of inspiration is the world of intelligence gathering, you know like the covert world. How are they actually doing this, right? What's the fundamental model that they are using, and why have they separated um, the analytical arm and the operative arm of this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and even though it's very sequential in an analog world, it's very sequential. It's not very different when it's in a digital agentic world. It's just that the iterations can happen so fast that it seems like it's a continuous process, right?
Yeah, I think this is the I mean, this is the architecture essentially of agentic, intelligence, I would say. Yeah, I think because it basically this is what it's, so you have these tools, right? You have an autonomous process, right, that you could scale up, right? Meaning like once you have one of these robots, right, you could have a thousand of them like crawling and basically collecting signal and moving it back into a knowledge environment, and like inject basically it what it I forgot the name of the term again. Hold on, it's inference. Okay,
Inference, yes.
Yeah, that is the key activity, is the inference activity. Let's say the constant continuous inference activity, where you're basically going out and collecting information. The inference, and then whatever you build. Look, I mean, I'm not getting into the technical architecture of this, but so what you're doing is you have an inference engine that's constantly finding, keeping, trying to stay as up to date and assimilate as much knowledge and information as possible. And then you have a certain context, which is like the metadata about your organization, about your goals, whatever it is. And then the agent specification are the rules for how the agent is going to basically operate, make this, like, how's it going to prioritize whatever. And you can easily build that agent specification just by having like AI write it for you based on natural language, right? And so what it's going to
Mm.
produce is some kind of output that says, here are, like, whatever your agent specification secret sauce is, and whatever the person at the other end, whatever kind of report it is that they want to get, it's going to produce a set of, like, operational suggestions based on the data information that was gathered. And some of the information that could be input could be internal emails, like my boss emailed me and said I need to do XYZ and all of this stuff. Yeah, okay, I get this completely. I think this is pretty much how these things are going to work in the future. I think there's going to be
Yes.
a lot of people building these kind of autonomous engines like this. And it
Yeah.
really just is going to come down to, number one is, are you able to execute on the inference? Like, can you get at least a high, decent quality of like actual inference operating so that you have enough knowledge and information about the world to operate on? And then
Hmm.
what kind of secret special thing are you putting in your agent specifications that is better than the other guy, right? Meaning, like, you
Yeah.
have some kind of like knowledge about how to process this information that's going to be more effective, or give better choices, or presents
Yeah.
it in a way that is more effective for somebody else to be able to utilize this. And there's, yeah, I think building this for people, how you would deploy it as a product or other things, I think there's a lot of questions. Like, do you say, hey, you're gonna go in and get your own little like autonomous decision thing, and we're gonna have it connected up to all these different sources for you, and then we're gonna work with you and just determine how do we structure the output, or train you on the output so that you can then understand or see a list with whatever values you like, out rankings or whatever things that it's giving you, and then how do you then take action? I mean, yeah, this seems like like, this seems like a reasonable thing, that could provide value for somebody who couldn't build this for themselves, or
No,
set
I
it up.
think it's going to be I think it's going to be a necessity, and not only in the GTM process, but many other processes as well. And you touched upon like what people, the question I get a lot is, what's your moat, right? I mean, that's a buzzword, right? What's your moat? Why can't I just copy this with Cloud Code? And probably you can copy a lot of it with Cloud Code or something, but you know. I think the the short answer is, well, it's that shared context or that shared experience base that makes sure that if you that that makes my service just so much better than starting from scratch. It's like, just because you know how to build a house doesn't mean that you don't want to buy a condo, right? Um, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but the point is that if you say signal, what is your noise to signal ratio, right? If mine is 80% out of the box, you're gonna buy mine instead of building it for yourself, where it's like the ratio is 20/80 from the get go, and the only context provider is yourself, your own organization. Um, so for companies that are doing this kind of stuff, like this kind of architecture that we're talking about, if you concur that this is probably going to be like something that you need to be doing in lots of different in sorry, to answer a lot of different needs, well, your moat is really that experience that you're building, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah. I
experience
think
that you're
that
building, and I think
if
this is
you're
where,
trying to create
yeah.
a product offering, then it would be like, and you know, like if you're yeah, so if you're like
Okay, so we're touching upon something here, which I think is maybe for another talk, which is, the sharing of information and sharing of intelligence and sharing of data with the foundational models, and with what's it called, that agentic chat thing that Meta just bought, Moltbook or something, which is really just a way for you can train your agents, but who owns the training ground? Well, now it's Zuckerberg who owns it.
yeah,
That means, you know so understanding that behavioral data is also data and is also extremely valuable. And I think it could be a talk, a whole, it's a whole subject for another talk, is the dearth of relevant data for the foundational models, how they're going about accessing public records, enticing enterprises to open their doors, and should they or should they not do that, within the current frameworks of things.
I think it's
Um,
I think it's this right here. Um, is like so if you let's say you're take this into like a and then I but this is actually like a super fascinating conversation, by the way. That's why I'm like we got way over an hour, but it's worth it. So
mhm.
if you take this to the like this architecture and you start thinking about it, you're like where is the proprietary, where's the like secret sauce in this, right? And the secret sauce in this to me is in your proprietary LM. And what I mean by that is this, right? Imagine that the quality of the outputs is the most important thing, right? Meaning, like, as long operationally, look, getting access to lots of data is just a matter of cost, right? So, what you're talking about is converting all of this information. As long as you can execute, you can get access to all the data and the information and all this stuff. And what you then have to say is, okay, now you have a decider. Okay, the decider has like a kind of brain and an intelligence that shapes how the decider decides. And if you have a proprietary model that is
Mhm.
better than what somebody else could have, so it's like, to me, this would be the example of saying, like, if you and said, "Hey, I'm going to populate something with all of the knowledge and military knowledge of all of it from every published piece of military knowledge from now until the time back in the time of history, and train it to and test its decisions so that I have these like super high quality decisions that the thing is that if you have a proprietary LLM that you've trained that is better than the other guy or serves a purpose that people can't really get as good a result, because you think, and it's both a cost and an output factor, because the cost of going to go all the way back to this open source, right?
Well, I think one thing you're kind of missing in that, what you just said, Govind, is that a lot of the data we're talking about is behavioral data. So if you think about the records, whatever data you can mine from an enterprise, it's pretty much just documenting what they did last year and for the last.
No, that's not. That's just vectorizing their company data. The
Okay, but
LLM is the intelligence that makes decisions,
okay,
that produces the recommendations. And if you
sure.
Like imagine, let's take this to like a more technical level, right? If you design an LLM that when you feed it market data can make you the best recommendations for buy whatever, that's just a little better than the other guy, your portfolio is going to outperform and you're going to become a billionaire, right? So where's the secret sauce in that? It's because you've come up with an incredibly insane model, a decision model or whatever, LLM decision model that is better than the other guy. So if you have a better decision tool that
Okay.
that says I can take all of your inputs and give you a better recommendation, and how do you get that? You get that because you train and create a and I think this is what the guy. There's a guy that Anthony was Monroy. Monroy, I think. Anyway, he's crazy AI guy, and he's like, the future is going to be a million private LLMs, and I'm like, you're absolutely, because everybody's going to take their knowledge and their secret insights, everybody who can, and they're going to produce a secret LLM, right? For that is
Sure.
their
And yeah,
secret
yeah.
sauce.
Okay, I agree with that. And no, I know. I mean, yes, absolutely. But we also have to. I mean, I think that's only part of it. But because what goes into that LLM is your proprietary data, right?
Yeah, actually, it's. I think it's the training, right? Because what you
Oh,
want to
yeah.
do is you want to actually try to say like you probably want to simulate outputs, right? Like there's crazy stuff now where it's like, hey, take like this, like Mike H. He's like they have 36 AI,
They
personality
call it.
models, and they
Yeah.
run through and they're testing the best things. And so you're like, hey, I've created an LLM that can analyze your situation and give you the best possible recommendations. And if those are better recommendations or stickier recommendations or more effective,
Mhm.
whatever it is, it's like go
So
buy
okay,
X, right?
let me put it in a different way, and let's just keep LLMs and all that out of it.
Yeah.
So your sort of uh, vector for success is at the intersection of your research into what is public information, public data, and your knowledge of your proprietary information, your business internal information, right? So where those two sets of data intersect, that's where that's your uh, that's your if it's a Venn diagram, that's your where you can succeed, right? Whatever you're going to be doing, you're going to have a competitive edge. It's in that intersection. It's in that confluence. That's where you can succeed. If you give all your data away, you have no edge. If you give all your information away, or all your knowledge, or everything in your organization, if you give that away,
No, it's
put it
not the
away.
knowledge. That's the whole point. I think that's the key point. It's not the knowledge that is the advantage. It's the skill.
Okay, you can call it what you want, but
Well, no, they're two different things.
well,
Knowledge is the information that you have, right? You
no,
can give somebody all the knowledge in the world, but if they don't have any skill in using that knowledge, it's the skill. But so the proprietary LLM is not a knowledge base. The proprietary LLM is the skills is the skill. It's
okay, sure,
the
sure,
ability
sure,
to it's the combination of knowledge but it's the output of the knowledge. It's the recommendation. It's how skilled you are, how skilled your LLM is in producing recommendations or whatever outputs need to be produced. The skill level is the competitive advantage. And if you have a specific skill in a very specific niche or area that is better than the other guy, then you win.
yeah. But these things are hierarchical. So you have data, information, knowledge, skills, or wisdom, right? They're hierarchical. So information is codified into data. Data in itself is not usable, but um, 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 I think the my point still stands that if you look at, if all of this stuff is codified into data, and and your, you know, in order to succeed with anything like this model that we're talking about for GTM, creating that context, or that shared mind, or whatever, for your agents, just as with your flesh and blood human employees, creating, a shared context of information that is a combination of your internal stuff, and whatever, and being really good at filtering what's out there in the public domain is, I think, is crucial, right? I mean, that's at least my conclusion when trying to analyze this for GTM. That's my conclusion, that's the space you have to operate in. If you just build what we've just been talking about, and the only source of information you have is what's on the internet through a large language model, you don't have an edge, right?
Oh yeah,
There's no
yeah.
edge.
No, that's why you go back to the open source report. I lost it now, but that
Mm,
OSS report, and it's, I mean, first of all, it's a cost factor, right? If you're like, hey, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to connect to Gemini or whatever, right? See, it's all about a token economy, and so if you boil it down to the token economy, first of all, it's like, so if you build a solution that just goes out to Gemini and gives some people, goes great because you're paying for, like, Google's best reasoning, but it's, everybody has access to that if they're willing to pay a price. If you take
mhm,
open source and you create your own LLM, right, that is trained with your special knowledge, I mean, you can still go access these at various different points, but whatever
mhm,
you create, if you're going to productize like autonomous intelligence, I think it's going to come down to basically leveraging one of these like open source models, uh, to one extent, and also like conditioning those models, or creating your own like private LLM that is basically, open source, but you train your own private LLM, right? So
mhm.
that, that if you take Anthony's thing, it's like there's a billion, there's going to be this huge proliferation of LLMs, right? Because you can, and you can, because what they're actually, they're it's a huge proliferation of what LLMs are. Basically, they're decision models is what they are. They're super rich decision models, and
Or
so the
prediction, yeah.
brain that you create is going to be so I think that's, and you can't do it with these public, you'll run out of money,
Yeah, I'll offer you one other perspective
yeah.
on this, before we
Yeah, we
we're
should
up.
probably do something useful with our time.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me
So
pop to the
I'll
map.
offer you one other perspective on this, and that is, um, the death of the software developer has been predicted, right? Yet it's not really happening. It's not really happening. Uh, um, I don't think it's gonna happen, because if you think of like any kind of um, um, any enterprise today is like 2% software and 90 and 98% other stuff, right? So I think and the reason why it's only 2% software and the 2% IT is because developers have been really really hard to find, right? There's been a lack of developers, and there's also a price point. They're expensive. So if the price point of if they become more abundant, are you just gonna not employ them, or do you think your enterprise would actually make a better margin being 50% software and 50% people, given everything we've talked about today? So therefore, I don't think there's going to be that. We're just going to expect more from software developers. You're
I
gonna
think there's a
expect,
huge chunk of like existing software that needs support. It's just going to take time for it to transition.
no, but
What I
listen,
see is a lot of agentic engineers, not prompt
sure,
engineers, but
okay,
like
but
agent.
call them whatever you want.
Yeah,
But
no,
we're
engineering
gonna
is not going to die. It's going to get
right.
more. There's going
So,
to be
but
a
you
huge
but
demand.
the
Yeah,
output, you expect from one developer is going to grow, right? You want you're gonna expect more output from one
yeah. In terms
developer
of
because
lines of code, yes,
yes,
absolutely.
because you don't have to massage the keyboard. You can ask the agent to do that. Now, the
Yeah,
analogy for sales is what I think is the same. That you're not going to take the human sales guy out of the loop because we're doing whatever we're talking about here, but the output you're expecting from your sales development representative is going to go up because you're giving him this agentic research team, and therefore he should produce more. Just like you're giving your software developer cloud
so
code and all this, and
here's an
therefore,
interesting, and I hear what you're saying. Here's an interesting thing, though. I mean, so all of that is I totally, I mean, on one level I agree with you. There's this other dynamic that which I think people miss, which is, and it kind of goes back to the whole Roman analogy and Roman artillery, right? The Romans invent artillery, dominate for a while. Everybody else realizes I've got to have artillery. And, now that being said, artillery, innovations in artillery have dominated, the warfare, right? Oh, for since the history of artillery, of throwing things, rocks began, right? And so the what happens is you have disturbances of the equilibrium where somebody gains a technological advantage, and that becomes, but that pretty quickly it becomes the new norm. So I think what's going to end up happening is that people are just going to shift to new things, right? Because you have competition, and at the end of the day, if you're like, hey, I'm going to do more for a little while, doing more works, but the other guy does more, and the other guy does more, and the other guy does more, and pretty soon you realize that actually, like, our effort. Now what happens is, sure, does it let me send more messages, but you still have your time and the amount of time in your day, and it's just going to come down to these things at the end of the day of like, like right now the people who jump on this are going to get an unfair advantage, but in a year or two everybody's going to be doing it, and it's just a new type of competition.
yeah, so it becomes a deed of necessity. Just like whoever bought, converted to automobiles for transport of goods, they probably had an advantage for a while,
For a
and
little
then
while they had an advantage, and then everybody had cars.
but at the end of when everyone had cars, was the transportation industry more productive or less productive than before?
I mean, that's the whole thing. Is it's a in the competitive. I mean, how do you say, what's it? There's a certain element of zero sum game, and
But is it
and
though? If we can,
I think it is in a
doesn't
certain
doesn't
context,
the
in the sense that there's a
productivity, if you introduce something that increases productivity, I mean, it won't make I mean, it won't
no.
the
As soon
output
as
will
you
become
apply a
more.
measurement, it's like inflation. Like inflation, like there's a certain amount of money and resources, and yes, those resources keep growing, but the individual shares of different things, and like at any point in time, like markets become sort of fine. I mean, this just gets into a series, but there's a finite amount, and if you just keep adding more, all it does is create the temporary illusion of more,
No,
but then it just creates inflation, and that
that's
whole
a
cycle
creativity.
is, so actually,
That's a
like if you get back
misconception.
into like liberal economics and stuff like that, I think we use a poor metric for how, or for monetization, which is based on the assumption of growth. And it's not, it's a false assumption, because you simply run at, like, like human productivity or economic productivity, it's an exponentially decreasing curve. Like at some point in time we've maxed out, and what we have to do, and so in the short term we print more money, or you take, but here's the limiting factor, at least right now. There's only a finite size to our earth. Like there's only so much land that somebody can own. And so if you take real estate as a factor of that, and you say, let's just look at the division of real estate, it's a zero sum game. If you take real estate from somebody else, and so the fundamental mechanics of value, there isn't actually ever really more. It looks like more, and then we have inflation, right, or whatever, or somebody else is taking more from somebody else. It's always
No,
that.
no,
Yeah, I don't know.
well, um, if you say it's a null-sum game because the Earth is a finite entity, in that sense, yes. But everything we do on it in human terms is not a null-sum game. So, and
No, it doesn't mean that you can't create your own unlimited productivity or opportunity or all of those things. It's just that, like in economic reality, we have this idea that you see, markets and economic, progress is always measured by assumptions of growth, and that's not necessarily, that's a Western capitalist mindset. There's other ideas, economic models that can be predicated on stability, right, and not heavily growth oriented. And so we've adopted that Western capitalist mindset, and it has consequences to it in terms of consumption and other things like that, where it has its excesses. But hey, I should run because I have you too. You have real stuff. This was a great conversation, though, man. I'm going to transcribe this into something really fun, and then we should definitely keep the conversation going. I want to see what you actually build.
Yeah, we can do that. In a later session, we can do a little.
Yeah. No, I have to run, but this was great, man. This is good stuff. I appreciate it, Morton. Say hi to Sunny, and we'll keep it going.
All
man.
right, cool.